Thank you so much. It's so beautiful to see so many people here today at this beautiful and for Foundation headquarters building. Beautiful view, beautiful location. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being so numerous today. I see people still getting in, but we need to start to stay on schedule. So let me introduce myself. I'm Laura Meggiolara. I'm Managing Director at the Land Portal Foundation. The Land Portal Foundation is a global nonprofit that maintains a digital platform called landportal.org, which is a space, a free space for data sharing, information sharing, knowledge sharing, and open debates. Together, in partnership with the tenure facility, we implemented this initiative, the Land Dialogues, which I'm very proud to be presenting today. And we are very lucky that the Ford Foundation have been supporting this program over the years. So it started in 2020 during the pandemic, when this type of events were really not possible, and it started as a webinar series. But this is the first time that we organize an hybrid land dialogue, so in front of an in-person audience. But we also have hundreds of people registered and attending online to be here today, and also to listen or to watch this event later on. As I said, it started as a webinar series with one mission: to have Indigenous peoples and local communities and their land rights to be front and center of the climate agenda. This was the goal, and it's still our commitment today. And it has been really a joy to see these dialogues becoming a community and a community resource over the years. So every time we organize a land dialogue, we have 1,000 people registering, again, to attend live or to listen or to watch afterwards from more than 40 countries. And it's a free conversation, really a safe space for open dialogue, is really with very few boundaries. We cover topics such as forest governance, but also sovereignty over land data. We learn from about Indigenous youth. We also have asked Indigenous leaders to teach us how to prevent future pandemics, or we ask about how to produce renewable energy in protected territories, or to protect biodiversities, or other very important topics for this community. We also use this space to preview COPs or to follow up on discussions during COPs. So it seems like a stretch to describe this space as a pulsing with energy, but really, I really believe that the land dialogues, they do. There is a lot of energy in these conversations and in organizing and getting together with Indigenous organizations in organizing these discussions. So we gather perspectives, but even emotions around issues that are really, really important for Indigenous and local communities, but also for the entire world. So producing the land dialogues is a practice, saying, building a community. And I'm really happy, and I welcome all of you today here to join this community and to connect to future land dialogues. So I want to show my appreciation to the team of the Land Portal Foundation and the tenure facility, who have worked tirelessly over the last 2 months to make this happen today. Thank you so much. And really thank you to the Ford Foundation for entrusting the implementing partners to build these initiatives over the years. Again, I want to quote someone that described this space as a pressure-free space to have open dialogues among people who aren't normally in conversation. That's how I like to describe this initiative. So thank you again for being here. Let me just share a few housekeeping rules on how it works. So today we will have 90-minute conversation. Again, there are hundreds of people also following us online, virtually. We also have time for questions, a Q&A session at the end. So please prepare your questions, and we'll make space for it at the end. The webinar is in English, but we have also simultaneous translations in Spanish, French, and Portuguese. So to access the translation, you can use your headset. But for those joining us virtually, just click on the globe icon at the bottom of the Zoom windows. Like I said earlier, the discussion will last for 90 minutes, and the Q&A will be about 10-15 minutes in the end. Please, for the virtual colleagues, if you have questions, please use the Q&A box and not the chat box, which would be confusing. And those of you that are here in person, please prepare your question, and we will try to go to them at the end of the session. Now, I'm really especially honored to introduce Darren Walker, president of the Ford Foundation, to kick off this day of dialogue and learning during the New York Climate Week. Darren, over to you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Laura, and good morning, everyone. Good morning and welcome to the Ford Foundation Center for Social Justice. How wonderful it is that we kick off UNGA Week here at the Ford Foundation with this dialogue. It is so important to me personally as I reflect. Some of you may know that I've announced that I will be retiring from the Ford Foundation next year. And as I reflect on my 12 years as president, there are few initiatives that have made me prouder, provided me with more satisfaction and inspiration than the work that we have done around Indigenous peoples and local communities. I am so grateful to all of you for being warriors on the front lines, for being the people who brought together the kinds of dialogues and places and spaces that have made a tremendous difference. I want to thank my colleague Anthony Bebbington. I want to thank everyone at the Ford Foundation. So many of you are in this room and in this building who have worked hard. And of course, the Tenure Facility and the Land Portal Foundation. The partnership for us has been enormously satisfying and successful. So thank you. But I want to just start when it starts, and that's with the facts. We need facts more than ever in our discourse. And so I want to start with the facts. Indigenous peoples' territories are home to 36% of the world's remaining intact forests, 24% of above-ground carbon in tropical forests, and 80% of the world's forest biodiversity. Think about that. Indigenous peoples and local communities have a right to own and manage their own land and their resources. When Indigenous peoples and local communities have legally recognized and enforced rights, they protect their lands, they protect their forests. But finance here is crucial. High quality funding and sufficient quantity of resources are imperative. Now, the global climate finance system, including both domestic and international flows from public and private resources, reached an all-time high of $1.4 trillion in 2022. And that's good news, but it's not enough because we know that the figures are well below the estimated 5.2 trillion per year needed to stay on track to limiting 1.5 degrees warming by 2030. So it's great news that we have, particularly we public and private donors, have pledged a collective $1.7 billion to support Indigenous and local community tenure rights and forest guardianship. But it's not enough. It's been great that we've catalyzed spaces for social movement organizations and created the resources for those organizations to do their very best work. Now, I'm pleased to share that at the Ford Foundation, we have made great progress. Since our pledge in 2021, we've allocated $119 million to partners advancing the tenure rights and forest guardianship of Indigenous peoples and local communities. We've surpassed our $100 million commitment, but that's not enough. So I believe we need to prepare to double down. We need, and I believe, communities should decide for themselves which types of funding are aligned with their needs and their aspirations. And this is where our rhetoric in the world of philanthropy often falls short. We talk a really good game in philanthropy about supporting people closest to the challenges and the problems. And then we don't do that. And so this initiative for us has been an opportunity to hold ourselves accountable to the rhetoric of funding and empowering local peoples. But our work is far from finished. The Ford Foundation is committed to joining the second pledge after 2025 and encouraging other funders to join us and to do the same. We are keen to continue working with the Forest Tenure Funders Group and peer funders, IP and LC communities, and other partners to advance Indigenous peoples and local communities' tenure rights and their forest guardianship. There are so many people in this room I can thank, but I do want to call out and introduce one of my sheroes, Nanette Royo, who, as you all know, is the Executive Director of the International Land and Forest Tenure Facility, who I encountered several years ago. And what I most was impressed by was her intelligence, her fierceness, her determination, her unwillingness to take no for an answer, which is an example of exemplars who are zealots doing the hard work that we who sit in nice office buildings like this sometimes can't even imagine just how hard it is. But she does it with grace, with kindness, and please, Nanette, come forward and let us all recognize and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you so much, Darren. Just because Darren will not be here for a long time, let me ask the panelists to please come. Maria Pia, please come in now. Sit, take a seat, take the farthest right. And then we have Angela, please come, take a seat next to Maria Pia. Next to that, we have Kimaren, please come. And Dr. Mirna Cunningham, please come. And then we have Stephanie Speck from the Green Climate Fund, please come. And we have Asil Undaland. And then please, we would like to just stand together and take a picture before we lose. Yeah, so let's make sure, yes, with Darren, yeah, go ahead. And we have online, for people who are online, we have Sonia Sabita. She is the assistant of Carlos Manuel, and let's have a one government representative here. She's still here. Sonia Guajajara, please come. Please come, join us. Please come, just for this. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, photographers, please take a picture. Okay. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Darren. Yes, yeah, we heard Darren. It is a very important moment, a moment to reflect on the commitments and our work together to get to action. And we have speakers to help trigger that conversation today. It's very important that all of us here know that we can participate. We'll make sure to stick to time so we can listen to the others. We have, I think, 100, how many people online right now? And we're very aware, we're respecting that we're not alone here in this space, we have others. Targeting a pledge is an important agenda. And we want to come away with some concrete suggestions. And we know everyone here in the room have a part in this. And I would like to deeply acknowledge that everyone here in the room have contributed, have worked hard, and will continue to work hard. I will start with Maria Pia. I will introduce her first. She is a lawyer. She's specializing on international environmental law. And she is right now the regional program manager, strategic coordinator for the Alliance of the Mesoamerican Territorial Funds. And she is here with us, and she will share for 3 minutes. Let's watch the time. I'm not good at watching time, but from your heart, what are Indigenous-led funds? And what's your experience raising funding for it? And you can specify, bilateral, multilateral, if you like. But what's your experience from your heart? How do you feel when you push for Indigenous-led funds? But what is it first, and then what's your experience with it?
Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to have the Mesoamerican Territorial Fund from the Alliance of Peoples and Forests, Mesoamerican Alliance of People and Forests. What are we? Okay. I think Indigenous-led funds came to this ecosystem because of 2 reasons, mainly. One is because it's recognition and reivindication of the rights of indigenous people and local communities to have access to funding, to direct access to the resources that are going to affect and impact their territory and their lives. So this is a reivindication of indigenous people and local communities. And second is to change the predominant rigid environment of financial ecosystem. The fundings that are all over the place now, pledges, COPs, commitments are great, but how to really land those resources where it's most needed, where all these people are taking care of the forests, of the marine ecosystems, of the lungs of the world. The humanity is there. It is not about local investment. It is not about territorial investment. This is about the impact that these remain forests and remain key ecosystems are going to have for the humanity and for the world, at such. And what is my experience? The second question. It's hard. It's hard because the predominant funding and financial ecosystem is very rigid, and it's made of rules that are almost impossible to reach for indigenous people-led funds. We are being supported by the philanthropic world, but the thing is that we want to scale. We want to really reach what is happening on the field. And the way how we do it is very, it's complicated because it's not easy to face those challenges. So we are here to demonstrate that yes, we can, that yes, we need it, and it is a must. You know, we have to support this kind of initiative if we really want to achieve sustainable development goals, if we really want to achieve all these climate goals and conservation goals.
Thank you.
Did I miss?
Yes, you're right on time. Thank you.
3
Thank
minutes.
you very much. Thank you very much. Yes, we go to the next. Angela. Angela is from the Kakuyana Tunayana Indigenous land. I am sorry if I mispronounce. She is an Indigenous leader from the Brazilian Amazon, and she is a member of the executive board of COIABE. And she is, for now, coordinating the indigenous organizations in the Brazilian Amazon, and especially the Podali Fund. So it is a very important fund for the Brazilian Amazon. My question to you, the latest survey shows that with the pledge, it's still 7% that went directly to Indigenous peoples organizations in the front lines. What are the challenges and the barriers in your experience, especially because you have done it? And how is that going to help us understand what the needs are? So thank you. Your experience with this, and what do you think are the issues, and what are the needs?
Bom dia, muito obrigada pelo convite de poder fazer uma reflexão importante aqui diante de, principalmente, pessoas que têm um compromisso e a responsabilidade pela vida, né, da humanidade a partir da garantia dos territórios indígenas. Gostaria de saudar aqui em nome dos povos indígenas da Amazônia brasileira a todos, em especial a ministra dos povos indígenas do Brasil, que é cofundadora desse fundo, o Fundo Pudari. Junto com ela, tornamos possível e concretizamos um sonho de muitos anos de uma construção de instrumento de financiamento, de autonomia e uma saída, uma resposta sobre quais são os desafios de tornar realidade os nossos sonhos de manter nossos territórios equilibrados, protegidos e, sobretudo, né, com direito para manter nossas vidas. Sobre a pergunta, uma preocupação que continua, né, nos assolando das dificuldades de acesso aos recursos. E esses últimos levantamentos do que se comprova que menos de 7% foi destinado diretamente, né, para os mecanismos, os espaços de fundos ou de outras formas dos povos indígenas, é um reflexo, sobretudo, do não reconhecimento do papel e da importância dos povos indígenas para a manutenção da biodiversidade, do clima e da vida humana. A partir do momento que não se reconhece essa importância, você não confia. Tem a ver com a falta de confiança dos nossos mecanismos, do nosso compromisso e das nossas capacidades de gerir grandes recursos. E a nossa avaliação é essa. Não adianta a gente construir mecanismo como temos no caso do Fundo Indígena da Amazônia Brasileira, Pudari, se não há uma confiança, inclusive de muitos que aqui falaram sobre compromisso de manter 80% da biodiversidade viva, de 36% de áreas preservadas. Porque o outro desafio é que, quando a gente acessa esses recursos, ela não é justa, tem a ver com a justiça também de acessar esses recursos. Ela é muito desproporcional para a dimensão da responsabilidade que temos, sobre a dimensão territorial, dimensão da responsabilidade de manter as vidas. Então, está na hora de fazermos uma reflexão sobre a necessidade de termos, de fato, o acesso justo, o acesso numa dimensão da responsabilidade, porque muitas vezes, quando a gente acessa, ela é muito injusta em termos de valores. E o outro desafio é que esses financiamentos, elas não acompanham nem as nossas dinâmicas de vida e muito menos dinâmica hoje, né, do desequilíbrio do ambiente e do clima. A gente se encontra num período de estiagem, de muitas queimadas, que precisa, por exemplo, paralisar a aplicação desses recursos. E muitas vezes somos punidos ou somos diminuídos ou perdemos pontos dos financiadores quando a gente não cumpre. Então, se não houver uma conexão, um entendimento da humanidade sobre o papel e sobre a necessidade de ajustar as dinâmicas de execução, de acesso desses recursos, não vamos continuar mantendo 80% como a gente sempre manteve, com recurso ou sem recurso. Então, para nós, povos indígenas, muito mais importante do que ter recursos financeiros nas nossas contas, nos nossos mecanismos de financiamento, seja fundos, outros mecanismos, há uma necessidade de uma sensibilização da humanidade sobre a importância que temos para termos uma resposta efetiva. Então, concluo aqui a minha fala sobre essa chamada de uma reflexão, de um acesso justo, equilibrado e numa dimensão que é necessário de fato. E sem nós, povos indígenas, a gente tem uma grande realidade de ter esse mundo em colapso bem próximo. E, para isso, a resposta somos nós.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is high stakes, and the stakeholders that are putting so much into this are not understood in the manner by which they can get support. It's very important. Myrna, we know Myrna Cunningham Kain, who doesn't, but I would still like to introduce, she's the chair of our board, but she is really here to tell us what has been your experience, Myrna, having received funding, formed Indigenous-led funds, channeled funding, advised many funds to channel funding, even multilateral funds. And over the years, you have consistently done this. So for now, you would be really facing the, okay, action. What's your reflection? What would guide an action to meet this commitment, especially with the pledge coming?
Thank you, Nanette. Well, we expect a bigger pledge in the first place. So a bigger pledge. And we need that pledge to cover other ecosystems, not only rainforests. I live on the east coast of Nicaragua, and everything that happens in the forests impact on the communities that lived on the coast. So we are seeing all of the impact of what is happening in the Arctic and how it affects the rest of ecosystem. So if we really want to change things in the world, we need to have a bigger idea of a pledge that can really address not only the problems that we're facing in rainforests, but in other ecosystems. The second thing is that pledge needs to have at least 20% going directly to Indigenous-led funds. It should be at least 20%. Maybe it should be more. When I listen to my sister here, Indigenous-led funds are the ones that are really doing things on the ground. So we need the pledge to specify that. Now, I do believe that there have been some changes in philanthropy. we find a lot of philanthropies that really respect Indigenous people's rights. And they are beginning to understand that if you are going to support Indigenous peoples, you need to channel resources without requirements. With, that they should have confidence in Indigenous people's decisions. If we are protecting 80% of biodiversity, how could you not have confidence in Indigenous people's decisions? But I do believe that there are also some important changes in some of the multilaterals. I have been in contact with IFAD for the last 15 years, and at IFAD, we are trying to, and I'm saying we because I'm part of the steering committee, we're trying to change the way in which IFAD addresses poverty in the rural areas. One, with a policy that define how they should work with Indigenous peoples that respect self-determination, free, prior, and informed consent, Indigenous peoples' rights. Second, that they should change a lot of the things that they have in their other policies and their procedures on how they address. They should hire Indigenous peoples experts. We should be part of the designing, the monitoring, the evaluation of the different programs. And they have also created a specific facility to support Indigenous peoples in smaller projects compared with what they do. And that fund is managed through Indigenous organizations in the 3 regions in the world. So if multilaterals do not want to give us directly, we are also creating other mechanisms in these institutions that you can channel your resources through that, and that can complement. And we know that that is not enough because we don't want only small resources, we want big resources. So we need the big resources to change, and that's why the policy, and that's why the procedures. And we have some good examples. Even in the World Bank, we have the dedicated mechanisms that have opened the possibilities, for example, in Latin America, in Peru, in other countries, that can prove that Indigenous peoples can manage resources if they have access. So those are some of the things that I have learned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rina. So it is possible. It is possible. Okay, and so how much is enough?
I don't want to say the amount because Darren said 5.4 trillion are needed. So if we say 2 billion, that's too little. That's too little. So I think we should think and we should advocate for more resources. And especially if we want some of that to go through government, some to go through intermediaries, NGOs, and some to go through Indigenous-led funds. So we need more funds.
Okay, 20%, my goodness. This is our challenge, all of us. 20%, Brigitte, can we measure this? I would like to move on to Kimaren, a deep friend of mine I really admire. He is the co-founder of ILEPA, Indigenous Livelihoods and Enhancement Partners. Kimaren, despite all of these journeys of getting funds to organizations that are Indigenous-led, he has been consistently following an institution that we have been really looking at because it was created in COP15, the UNFCCC. And the mechanism for supporting that is the Green Climate Fund. And I would like to ask you, Kimaren, all these years you've been following the Green Climate Fund, what are your reflections? What is it in this context of commitment to action would you like to raise so that together we can address this resourcing?
Thank you very much, Nanette, and a very good morning to all of us. It's difficult to speak after the distinguished speakers who went before me. But since I have a mic and I represent the voice of men in the house, I need to speak somehow. And so I'm honored really to be here. And yes, I've had the chance to follow the Green Climate Fund. It is supposed to be the fund for climate adaptation and mitigation. And I think for me, what I've learned is that we need, as we think about successful model at this level of multilateral financing, Darren said it, it should be informed by facts and realities. And one of the facts is the unique nature of indigenous people in many fronts. Number one is the landscape and the scale they manage. Not just how big, but how rich this landscape is. This is one reality that we cannot ignore. The second is that these landscapes and these communities have the lowest carbon footprint, but they pay the highest negative price of the impacts of climate change. But the other reality is that they are not just victims. Through their indigenous knowledge systems and practices, they have pioneered resilience adaptation strategies that have sustained biodiversity in this landscape. There's also a historical fact of exclusion that layers the impacts of climate change. It's a fact that has been established. And this knowledge system is accepted even within the IPCC. But also, the other reality is that we have accepted their rights in the Paris Agreement. We have acknowledged indigenous knowledge in many, many fronts, in many decisions of the UNFCCC. We have accepted that full and effective participation is critical for their actions to inform climate interventions. We have also acknowledged that community-based monitoring information system is critical for ground truthing impacts of climate change on the ground. We have even gone further to say nature is not just about carbon, it's also about non-carbon benefits. But to what extent do these realities actually inform the financing architecture that we have experienced? One other fact is that these lands have become the experimental grounds for carbon market offset projects. So we are layering the impacts of climate change with the negative impacts of unsafeguarded response measures to climate change when communities are benefiting the least. And so one thing I have learned with the Green Climate Fund is that it is not enough to have policy commitments. The engagement of indigenous people in this mechanism is not to beautify the UNFCCC text documents with indigenous people friendly language. The idea is that self-determination of indigenous people is reflected in decisions and also in access to funds. And so one of the things that I think we need to do is we need to go beyond text recognition. I've said before, and allow me to repeat, what indigenous people are experiencing in this access to financing is death by recognition. That yes, indigenous people are vulnerable, need support, and we stop there. We need to go beyond text recognition to actually make sure they access resources. We need to go beyond country ownership and country-drivenness approach, because there is a proven reality that the sorry state of indigenous people is an outcome of flawed relationship between them and their national government. This mechanism has not delivered for indigenous people. We need to go beyond prohibitive, complicated arrangements that, though there is aspiration, we take away with the access modalities that are prohibitive. I see Nonette is signaling I should stop. We need to go beyond the narrow range approach. Indigenous people, as said by Mina, are not just forest landscapes. They are in savanna rangelands. They are in forests. They are in the mountains. They are in the Arctics. They are in the coastlines. We need to go beyond short-termism of indigenous people access to finance, where they are perpetually one-year projects. The things they deal with, like land tenure, are very long-term engagement system. We need to go beyond the small grants. Indigenous people are perpetually cast to be small grant recipients. They never outgrow. They never seem to learn to develop the capacity to manage big grants. And therefore, they are always babysitted by mediators, by interlocutors, So we need to go beyond the layering of this financing arrangement to ensure that Indigenous people access. We need to go beyond weak information systems that do not empower them to make decisions that affect their lives. We need to give effective voice. And so for the Green Climate Fund, there is an aspiration in the policy for direct access, but it remains an aspiration to date. There are certain discussion around learning from others. We've done an analysis of how direct access is happening in other instruments, but the Green Climate Fund is yet to go there. It's impacting Indigenous people. It is gone to red now with an unlimited window of access to support RED+. Indigenous people are and will continue to be impacted by intervention supported by multilateral financing, and therefore Indigenous people need to be at the center of access to these financial resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's important to acknowledge that Kimaren is in the IPAG, in the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Group of the Green Climate Fund. So this gets to the Green Climate Fund, which also gets me to Stephanie. Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. And we're moving now to our partners in this big ambition. And these are the multilateral development actors. As head of communications in the Green Climate Fund, I hear and you hear and our hearts go out to this call. What would be your response given that challenges that governments are sitting in the Green Climate Fund as well in this big ambition now?
Thank you, Nonette, and thank you, Kimaren, for those very heartfelt remarks. I am the head of communications, and I also lead our vulnerability portfolio for GCF. But let me open by paying my respects to Indigenous leaders here in the room with us today and online, and recognising your guardianship and protector role of this planet that we're all trying to call home for a little while longer. I have a whole realm of corporate notes, but let me speak a little more from the heart, if that's okay. A year ago, Mafalda Duarte, who's the executive director of GCF, stood here at UNGA and she promised to radically reorganise and reform GCF. GCF in 2015 was appointed as the financing mechanism for that $100 billion pledge. And it's our job to allow or have developed countries contribute to us so that we then invest that money in developing countries. And we have $15 billion committed at the moment and another $15 billion to spend in our next programming period until 2027. It sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money, but it's a drop in the ocean. I think that, if I'm speaking very honestly, that GCF has had a culture and a history of perhaps not owning up when we've done things slowly, bureaucratically, with great complexity. But Mafalda last year said that's changing. Last week, you would have seen that we restructured the organisation completely. We were previously structured around transactions, so bits of the process, which led to a really siloed approach. And sometimes if you were dealing with us, you might have been dealing with 8 or 9 individuals, rather than one person who really understood your needs, particularly for Indigenous peoples communities. This is critical. We've restructured around regional lines. We have paused accreditation, which is a huge process and really difficult for many, particularly direct access entities, until we have unpacked that and brought a new approach to the board this year. We are also talking very much this week at UNGA. We know if with the scale of the climate emergency, the urgency of it, we can't afford to take 3 or 4 years to look at a concept note and then decide whether we're going to fund it. We are going to do this in 6 weeks. So as an organisation, if you come to us with an idea, we will give you a no or a go in 6 weeks. And in fact, then from the acceptance of concept note through to approval by our board has to approve everything, we will do that in 9 months. These are huge commitments and promises that we're making. And an important part of that, and I understand and hear this very well, is moving beyond the text recognition, which often feels like it's a placebo for action, right? I know that Mafalda is very, very committed to taking the work that we do with Indigenous peoples communities away from a policy and into action. And that's why the direct access entities, and please understand that that doesn't mean the Ministry of Finance or country, that means community groups where the land tenure facility is going through accreditation at the moment. We've pledged to double the number of direct access entities, and that should go some way towards making sure that the people with the most to lose have the most to gain through the funding that we can offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. 6 and 9. What was it again?
Yes, 6 and 9.
and 9. We have to remember that. And we all can contribute to this, all of us. You see, this is not just one task. This is a common task. Asil, thank you for being here. Asil is from Enable, from the World Bank and running Enable. Tell us, Asil is from Kyrgyzstan, right? From Kyrgyzstan. She's also from the indigenous communities there. It's important that we hear the voice of the World Bank in the context of this ambition, but it is not to ask for what can be delivered, but it would be like your reflections. Again, from the heart is really important. You know this, you feel this, you are also affected by this. Please, Asil, share some insights.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning to everyone online and here. And thank you to panelists. It's great to see you all and hear aspirations and your calling upon us, and especially multilateral development institutions. And I just want to, not in defensive mode, but remind us all that World Bank is a bank. It's a development organization that has a mandate to reduce poverty now on a livable planet, with much increase in scope ambition with our new president, Ajay Banga. But we're still a lending institution. We contribute with lending to all members of our countries. It's 189 countries. And this is where our World Bank gets financial reserves. We get it from repayments of loans, we raise money on financial markets and get contribution of our members. But at the same time, I want to acknowledge that World Bank was still one of the pioneers of direct access of indigenous peoples to climate finance through our small part of the bank's portfolio, trust funds. And trust fund is only maybe main our instrument, which is providing grant resources or concessional resources, not necessarily to the governments, members of our institution, but also to non-governmental organizations. And I think I see many of you who've been part of our trust fund forest carbon partnership facility, which started in 2010. This, I want to emphasize that this trust fund was set up by 17 country donors, by private philanthropies and civil society organizations to pilot RED+. And I think during this, from 2019, it's been a very slow road, but we've been able to try our instruments of direct financing to indigenous people through capacity building program. And I see that many graduates of this capacity building program are here because it's not only providing resources to the indigenous peoples organizations, but also creating spaces for them where decisions are made, where discourse on a global level and regional level, national level, on where and how climate finance should go and managed. Another example, I'm very happy to hear that Mafalda is doing a lot of good things in GCF. She's been leading our climate investment funds, which been a pioneering a dedicated grant mechanism. And dedicated grant mechanism been also on the scene for more than 14 years, I think, and it's disbursed more than $38 million directly to CSOs. And that's another very interesting instrument we are learning from when we started this new fund with Germany, this Enable. And hopefully this fund is exactly to work towards enhancing access for indigenous funds, indigenous communities two different climate finance streams. They're only in the beginning, but I hope all these experiences of the bank through the GM, FCPF, and others will help us to come closer to Indigenous peoples and institutions. And we are really happy that this pledge will be continued, because it's been a great start for the commitment for all of us to work together with indigenous communities, streaming finance. But we, as everybody said here, we need to go better and we need to go bigger. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We're noting that there is another session that we will hear from governments on a very comfortable, safe space about these ambitions and the hope for a pledge. It's already making us see how palpable it is, because Darren started with saying, let's go for it. It's a very important statement that we would like to acknowledge. And online is the advisor to the CEO of the Global Environmental Facility. And I am now just looking at the team. Are we able to broadcast Sonia Sabita Tiluksing? She is here with us and she's online. She's online with among 100 other participants in this dialogue. She is an environmental economist and has worked in these issues for a long time, 20 years over 20 years. I'm Sonia. Thank you for joining us. My question, and I would pose this really as a hopeful question. What could the GEF tell us and show us and guide us in channeling more funding to forest defenders and biodiversity stewards? What is the ambition, and what's realistic, and what's real? And we're all here. Yeah, we're all here to make that happen. Thank you, Sonia, please.
Thanks, Nonette. Everyone hearing me okay?
Yes, you're coming through very clearly and we can see you.
Great, thank you. I'm hearing a bit of an echo.
We don't hear it.
Okay, great. So yes, thank you, Annette, and thank you so much for having me and for facilitating my online participation. It's a great honor to be with you, albeit virtually. I was particularly honored to see earlier Minister Sonia Guajara in the room. So if she's still there, greetings from the GEF Secretariat and also from the GEF CEO, Carlos Manuel Rodriguez, who we've interacted with on. What is the good?
Hold a sec. We are getting feedback.
Yeah.
Can we turn off our mics, all of us? Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Should I restart?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So just thank you for facilitating my online presentation. It's a great honor to be here for all people. And I was saying that I was particularly honored to see Mr. Guajara. So if she's still there, greetings from the GEF CEO, Carlos Rodriguez, on several occasions. So what is the Global Environment Facility? We were established in 1991 on the eve of the Rio Summit. We are the financial mechanism for major international conventions, the UNFCCC, CCD, Stockholm, and we also support Africa with international quotas. And all of this to say we are a family that is dedicated to confronting climate change and supporting land. We work with a wide partnership that includes civil society organizations, private sector, scientists, and indigenous people. We are seen, I think, by many as a very significant environmental partner. This is evidenced by the fact that our mandate has been expanding. We were recently as the financial mechanism, or part of the financial mechanism for the High Seas Treaty, and also we've been in the process of establishing and programming the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, which I'll come to in a second. Now, 3 watchwords that guide the way in which Jeff programs, and in a way I want to use to answer your question, is integration, inclusion, and impact. Now, the Jeff's work is more along the lines of integration. You recognize 10 or 12 years ago, the world's environmental challenges need to be addressed in a holistic way. So we approach now the drivers of environmental degradation. We approach root causes rather than outcomes. And at the same time, we have the need for the whole approach that brings all of stakeholders in an integrated manner. So we have to bring the voices, the needs, the roles of Indigenous people. Indigenous peoples are the ones who are most impacted by the current state of our environment, and they're also the ones who are the protection and sustainable use, which many of our earlier panelists have made reference. So supporting Indigenous is vital for a habitat plan. The second watchword, inclusion. Inclusion is key to lasting conservation success. And only by being inclusive can we have the impact that we need. Hence the three watchwords: integration, inclusion, and impact. Now, the Global Environment Facility, am I still, yes, okay, sorry, yes. I thought I lost connection. The Global Environment Facility, we're the largest international funder of the global environment, and we're taking concrete steps towards tangible action on inclusion. The GEF has been supporting Indigenous peoples in their fundamental role as environmental stewards since we were founded over 30 years ago. And we are focused on this because Indigenous peoples are effective at protecting nature. And we are continuing to channel financial support towards civil society and towards Indigenous peoples in particular through dedicated programming like the Inclusive Conservation Initiative and through inclusive programming in the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, in which we actually have an aspirational portfolio level target towards funding towards Indigenous peoples. Now, why is there the need to focus on Indigenous peoples? And focusing and investing in Indigenous peoples is an effective way of sustainably impacting environmental conservation. 36% of the world's remaining intact forest landscapes are found in Indigenous lands. So it is effective to invest in Indigenous peoples. It is cost effective as well, and we're already counting on them. Of the world's terrestrial protected areas, 40% are found on Indigenous territories, but we don't seem to be funding them. Less than 1% of climate finance is going globally towards Indigenous peoples. So the programs that the Global Environmental Facility has, like the Inclusive Conservation Initiative, are groundbreaking in that we're providing real money directly to Indigenous organizations to implement their own approaches and priorities that deliver global conservation benefits. This ICI program is a $25 million initiative in 12 countries and managed by Indigenous organizations. And we're now entering a round 2 of Inclusive Conservation Initiative as well. And given that most finance for Indigenous groups is usually in the range of about $1 to $2 million, so a $25 million initiative with a second round coming is providing a much larger support than what we would see as the usual range. But of course, it's not just about money. And an earlier panelist alluded to this as well. Inclusive Conservation Initiative has been directed by Indigenous leaders. So they're building the evidence base and good examples that Indigenous conservations can and does work. So in summary, to answer your question, how do we, I put it in a more positive way. How do we amplify funding from multilateral towards Indigenous people? Well, we need to incorporate a whole of society approach into our work. We need to integrate different streams of finance and the impact on Indigenous people. So climate finance, biodiversity finance towards desertification, high seas, all of these different streams of funding that are predicated on the different conventions that we see need to be brought together in an integrated manner. We need to understand that Indigenous peoples they're not a homogenous group, and this may differ from one country, from one context to another. We need to elevate Indigenous peoples, the voices of Indigenous peoples, not just in financing decisions, but also in implementation. And we need to demonstrate more strongly the sustainable impact of investing in Indigenous peoples. One of the previous speakers spoke about, the need to increase awareness by humanity. And I think that the work that we do at the GEF, the work of the GCF, the work of the World Bank, of all of the multilaterals, we need to show much more clearly and strongly how investing and supporting people is the way to the future environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sonia. Thank you. We have 15 minutes, and I would really like, there are 300 people online, and there are some questions that are coming from online, but also from here. We have actors, implementers, funders, you know, collaboratives of donors. And it's very important for us here to be able to tell each other, you know, what could this big commitment, and our session is with Indigenous peoples and the multilateral development financing system. What could we do? You know, what are the challenges? How are we going to really understand what needs to change and what needs to change, right? So I will come back to you, but I would now take questions from the floor. Please identify yourselves. Number one, other. So yes, the gentleman at the back. So number 2, 1, 2, 3, Ruka. Let's start with 3. Okay, identify yourself first, and then if you have and then online, if there are questions, please forward them to me. I can't see them, and maybe we can do a couple. Yes, please. Yes.
Hello?
Can you please stand up so we can all see you?
Yep. So I have a question for my name is TR, and I'm a representative of AZOS. We are a funding channel for impact projects. And I have a question for Koyabe. It seems streams of rapid dynamic funding with features having trust and confidence as key features is needed in projects. And I just wanted to get further clarification as to how do we do that and what are some examples?
Okay, let's get an answer directly. It's very clear to Angela. Yeah.
Obrigada pela pergunta. Quando eu falo de confiança, é que muito desses acessos elas têm uma dificuldade que fica intangível para os próprios mecanismos dos povos indígenas. E o próprio processo de acesso ela é exclusiva, exclui, na verdade, a possibilidade desses mecanismos que são construídos na perspectiva e experiência dos povos indígenas. Então, é necessário mudar, inclusive, a própria forma de acesso aos mecanismos. Então, isso é relacionado também à confiança de que os nossos mecanismos têm efetividade, capacidade e a dimensão de gerir os grandes recursos.
Thank you. Thank you. Trust, and that the systems may not be exactly like the systems that we are familiar with, but it is something that we can trust. And many of us here can actually state and affirm that and be a testimony to that. Yes. Next question.
Hamadakiapi, Nick Tilson, Amachiapi, Chantea Washtenape Chuzapalo. My name is Nick Tilson. I'm Oglala, Lakota, from the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And I'm the president, founder, and CEO of NDN Collective, which is the largest indigenous-led fund in North America. Since our founding, we have funded over $100 million directly to indigenous communities and over 700 partners. The question I have is for the funders in this room. And I wanted to clarify too, that when I say indigenous-led, our organization is 100% indigenous-led. Our board is indigenous. Our staff is indigenous. Our grant reviewers are indigenous. Our finance teams are indigenous. Our capacity builders are indigenous from communities who built this collective. My question and my challenge is to funders of wanting, what is it going to take in order for funders to give up real money and decision-making powers directly to indigenous people? And how are we going to address, because what's happening right now, and what I will see, what's happening in North America and what I see is happening on a global scale, is that we're choosing to prioritize non-indigenous led type of funds and calling them indigenous-led funds by putting indigenous people on advisory boards when we should be in the driver's seat of making decisions over our lives and our lands. And I feel like a lot of what's not being said is the fact that when we talk about trust, we're talking, it's like they don't believe in our capability. Funders don't believe in our capability, even though we're some of the most regulated people on the planet that have maneuvered every single type of colonial government in the world. And quite frankly, every single type of monetary system in the world. And so my question is for funders is, what is it going to take for you to believe directly into the capability of indigenous people? Because we have that trust with our communities already. We already have those relationships. We don't need to be used to broker relationships for you to our communities. What we need you to do is give up money and decision-making power directly to impacted people. So that's my direct question, and it's for anybody in the room. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you for that very, very direct question. And that's a question for all of us. And I would like to ask the panel first, who would like to answer that question? What does it take? What does it take for funding to be really given directly to indigenous-led organizations? And what does it take to trust that that system works? Maria Pia.
Okay, I think it was a very deep and profound question. And I would like to say that I have an aspiration, that comes with facts. 80% of the multilateral funding goes to government and big NGOs. That's a fact. So I think it takes a lot of responsibility and commitment from multilaterals in using their resources and their position to really influence the system where they're working with. One of the things that I've noticed is that it is getting better. It is starting to be more inclusive, but we have a long way to go. Planning, designing, implementing from governments who are the most recipients of these funds, as well as big NGOs, needs to be more in touch and involved, and have more involvement with IPLC funds and communities directly since the beginning of the project. Another thing that is important, and we have to mention, is the importance and the role that they have to enforce social safeguards. Social and environmental safeguards are crucial for these projects, which are millionaires, to be really implemented in a fair and equitable manner in the communities. We have an example, for example, in Central America. The Green Climate Fund canceled a huge project because of disrespect of social and environmental safeguards affecting directly indigenous peoples' territories. And I think I don't want to say that it's great, but it is at least a sign that things are changing, and at least taking seriously commitments that are international rights and national rights as well. So for me, it is also important that they use their resources and that position to end impunity. If we talk about my region, for example, Latin America, we found that 85% of the cases of death, of assassinations of land and environmental defenders are taking place in that region. And that means that climatic funding and conservation funding is not in a silo. You have to connect things. You cannot keep going and giving and providing resources where actually something is happening in a very negative manner in the field. So for me, it's important from the perspective of a region that we have the most of the cases of assassinations of environmental defenders, which 43% of them are indigenous people. 43% are indigenous people, 12% are women, indigenous women. So it's not in a silo. And you can keep financing a system which is really, need to have some structural changes, not only from the finance point of view, but also from the human rights point of view. So that's what it takes. It takes the structural changes. It takes really the courage to see that we need to change that if we really want to impact and respect not only the indigenous people, but also ourselves as a humanity.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, hands for that. Anyone else? Mina, you want
Maybe
to
I can,
quickly, and then I will go to question 3.
as chair of the tenure facility, 80% of the tenure facility funds goes directly to, and this means that in the last 6 years, we have pushed from the board for that to happen. It means that we have to have more members on the board that are indigenous, that respond to indigenous peoples. And of course, indigenous-led funds should be 100% led by indigenous peoples. But in the case of the tenure facility, increasing members of the board, defining indicators to measure every operation to be sure that it's going to indigenous organizations, and to shift from intermediaries to discuss with intermediaries the role that they will play to really develop the capacity of the indigenous organizations to receive the funds. So you need to be on the board, you need to change procedures, you need to really, even I see Ruka, and I remember all of the relation between tenure facility and AMAN because of the pressure from multilaterals to go through a lot of operations that do not represent what indigenous peoples need to do on the ground. So you need the courage, but you need the courage to change. But you can only change if you are in the structures. You cannot change only by advising. They do not believe in advice because we need to be. So dialogue. How many years with IFAD? 17 years. How many years with the World Bank? My God, we have generations trying to change their procedures and trying to be on the table. So that is what it's required. So we need to develop, we have discussed this with Peter Seligman, Peter is here, and with Nonet. How can we develop the capacity of younger indigenous persons that can become the CEO of your foundations? We need more indigenous CEO. We need more indigenous persons in the board. And we need to continue educating philanthropy and multilaterals. And this requires a lot of working together.
Thank you, Mirna. Ruka. It took tears and sweat. And
I know. I
we
mean,
needed?
well, while we
Please
are all here, we used to be very scared more with the tenure facility compliance officer rather than NICFI. NICFI was like nightmare. But then tenure facility, my friends were like sweating when they heard tenure facility. So that's kind of stuff that we really need to. But I agree with my brother from the Indian collective. We must stop appropriations of indigenous identity. And I would say no to 2.0 pledge if we don't correct the wrongdoing that we have been doing so far. Because the more money you put, the more you actually deceive indigenous peoples. Because all the money will be eaten up by others. And I was so scared when you say about 6 weeks. That's totally dangerous to us because in the last 3 months, I've heard two complaints of misappropriations of almonds in the proposal to you. And so I think we need to correct a lot of things, put things in place. Safeguards must not be voluntary, because it is the obligations of the government, of everybody, to human rights. And it is already in the treaties, in the human rights standards and norms. We must not dilute them into what's so-called voluntary, because this is the obligations. And that is what's happening now in the safeguards, in the carbon market, for example. In Indonesia, it has been weakening the indigenous peoples' governance system, dividing and rules our community, misinformations. So safeguards are the human rights standards and norms. They should be obligations, not just voluntary. So I agree with Myrna, but also I disagree unless we really put this thing in places. Because what happened today is we have the policy shifting into the climate change mitigation adaptation. In Indonesia, we have the energy. Carbon now belong to the state. So indigenous peoples, we can have land and forest, but carbon belong to the state. And we will be only what's so-called, we get the benefit sharing. So these appropriations of indigenous peoples using our identity as the icing of your cakes must stop first. And due diligence, if you hear our name, call us and ask us if we really have given our consent or not.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's good guidance. Yeah, call and ask and verify. It's really important. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Nonette,
So
may I respond?
We have,
Nonette, may I respond? Nonette, behind you.
okay, here you are.
Because that's a serious statement that you've made there. I at no point said that we would sacrifice quality for speed. We have to do both. If we want to respond to the climate emergency, we have to do it quickly, and I think GCF is renowned for taking safeguards really, really seriously, and as we've just said, in fact, cancelled a project through long deliberation because we were not confident that our standards were being met. So there's a proof point there. And I really take it very seriously. If you're saying that you have evidence that something is not right in the process, then please speak to our independent redress mechanism or our independent integrity unit. So that, and I'm very happy to take that back to them.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't see your answer. I was looking this way. All right. We have time check. I just want the team to tell me how many minutes do I have? 0 minutes? 10. Okay, 10. Thank you. I saw the 0, not the 1. Okay, I see one here from Tanya. I saw one there from the corner, Health in Harmony. Who else raised? I saw more hands. Oh, Birgitte. 3. Okay, let's start with Tanya.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you particularly to the question from Nick from NDN. And in response to that, I would pose an invitation to donors and philanthropists in the room to really question our relationship with power and with money. And instead of asking our partners and our, in IPLC communities to prove to us how they have impact and how they're measuring impact, to really get out of our offices and our chairs, to understand how they work, to build real relationships with our partners in order to see the impact on the ground, and to see their ways of working to really support and drive that change. Instead of asking them to prove to us, we need to meet them halfway. And I would just pose that invitation to other donors in the room.
Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. Meet halfway. Yes.
Thanks so much, Nonette and Dr. Myrna and everybody in the room. It's stunning that we're chasing this money, and Darren opened with 5.2 trillion, But when we researched just the carbon dynamics of investing directly in community design solutions in indigenous communities, in Indonesia, for instance, over 5 years, the communities themselves returned over 12-fold on that investment. In Brazil, working beside Sonia and Pawanka Fund, we're projecting a 300-fold return on that investment just in carbon, starting to look at biodiversity and community thriving. And so how do we flip the script to recognize the true benefactors are the indigenous communities? They're the ones returning so much to the planet. And so we're chasing funding, and standing here in solidarity with indigenous leaders and communities, but really we should be knocking on their door and asking, can we come in and can we stand beside you? And so just to honor the work that goes into that under extreme violence and severe lack of safety. And so to continue to appreciate the true benefactors really are the communities who are doing this work. So thanks for the conversation. It's so needed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for those facts. Again, let's gather these facts and use it. Brigitte, another set of facts. Yes, where was the mic earlier? Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Nonette. I'm Brigitte from Charapa. You ask if we can measure if we're actually, fulfilling these pledges and meeting the aspirations, and if we are, achieving the change that we all want to see. And looking back, we have definitely not been able to measure this. We have had anecdotal evidence of where the funds are going, but we have not had a more systematic approach to that. So with a collective effort, we're trying to come up with, we have a common roadmap now, the Paris roadmap for tracking of funds. We have come up with, through a collective effort, with some very simple and clear parameters for how to track what is funding for indigenous peoples, how do we calculate amounts, and what counts as direct or indirect funding. We will discuss it further this week under the leadership of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities. I just think it's really important that also big institutions like GCF, GEF and others, they consider incorporating these parameters into their reporting system. It's based on the UN DRIP. It's solid work, including with statisticians who have contributed to this process. So I hope going forward, we will really have the correct measurement that we need to drive the change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The 300 people online, are there a couple of questions that came up from that? Okay, how can nature finance be directed to local actors in the meantime? We don't need interim solutions. Don't we need interim solutions? We were talking about currently directing to local actors. That is exactly what's being discussed here right now from and with our speakers. So I hope this question was sufficient and satisfactory to the one who's asking the question. Other questions? We still have probably 4 minutes. Yes. Yes. Oh, yes.
No, thank you. I think this is very important discussion, and since Cameron raised that, and Dr. Mirna said it's important that we work together all. And and we have to work in partnerships. We need to reform our systems of how we provide money and how we measure impacts and how we measure results. But it's also important to work together on carbon markets. I think that carbon markets happen. We want it or not, they are happening, carbon trades are happening. And as Ruka said, sometimes and often they can harm communities, but we need to create conditions, and I'm very much in line with your suggestions that safeguards need to be strengthened, but also should be owned by communities. They have to be designed by communities, they have to be managed by communities, and they have to respond to communities' needs. And in there, we also need to talk together more. We need to discuss all these challenges and raise awareness and capacities of communities either to protect themselves from these carbon cowboys, who Cameron often mentioned about, or get engaged and start claiming carbon rights, which, as Ruka said, in some cases being nationalized by the government. So it's again call for partnership, and next pledge, I hope we will be all working very closely together.
Thank you. So partnerships, I would just like each panelist to say your one sentence to in response to now this challenge of action, making commitment happen, and now we are in action. And then if you want to answer, is 20% possible? Okay, so that's just a question. I go back to Maria Pia. Is this possible?
Of course it's possible. Of course it's possible.
Of course it's possible.
20% and beyond is possible, is needed, and it's really a commitment that we should work towards COP30, for example. And it's also possible because we're talking about a lot of money, really. I mean, when somebody asks me, will you need more money? And I say like, yes, of course, but actually it's not really more money. It's more effective landing of the money in the territories. It's more channels that really use the money directly where it's needed.
Yes.
So for me, it's yes, more money, but how? An intense monitoring of that money to really make a concrete impact where the people live, where the indigenous and local communities are being the guardian of the forest and are being at the front line of assassinations and criminalization as well. So yes, it's possible.
Thank you. Angela.
Desculpa, Maria Pia, mas eu não acho possível 20%. Se somos capazes de preservar 80% da biodiversidade na sua complexidade, por que não temos capacidade de gerir 80% dos fundos globais para continuar preservando mais?
Yes.
Eu acho que esse é um ponto central que foi provocado pelo meu irmão, que ele fez uma grande pergunta. O que falta para que nós tenhamos a confiança para podermos, de fato, gerir e mostrar que temos a capacidade de manter, gerir, equilibrar os recursos que são destinados a isso? Me parece, meu irmão, que falta descolonizar a mente, o sentimento dos financiadores para que eles possam sentir o que sentimos com a conexão com o território. Falta descolonizar sobre as suas responsabilidades e deixarem de terceirizar a sua responsabilidade de salvar essa humanidade a partir do reconhecimento e da importância dos povos indígenas para a humanidade.
Thank you. Mirna.
Indigenous-led funds are already proving that it's possible to change power relations. We are promoting indigenous intercultural philanthropy. And this means that the first thing that we value is what the community brings to the conversation with other philanthropies. All of any amount of resources that we get will only complement what we are already doing. We are protecting territories. We are protecting biodiversity. We are applying our traditional knowledge system. We are using our territories. Our elders are the ones that are passing that knowledge to the other generation that will protect the Mother Earth where you wish to live. We are already doing it. So we are changing. So when I talk about dialogue, it's just creating spaces like this where you can listen to us. But of course, if you only listen and you do not give us the resources, then there will not be change. We need you to begin to influence other people.
Thank you.
The ones in this room, I know you all love us. But love is important. But without resources, we cannot change things. So we tell you the same thing we tell our governments. Don't define policies and things without budget.
Where's the money?
Where's the money? Where's the money?
Okay.
So
Thank you,
that's
Mary.
my minute.
Yes, Kimaren.
Yeah, picking up from Ina, love without action is dead love, empty love. So let's put the action. Yes, 20% and beyond is possible, only if our friends and funders are honest and courageous enough to acknowledge the fact. The fact that Indigenous people represent a future in terms of the solutions we are looking for. The fact that they represent the face of the negative impact. So if it is about solutions, we have. If it is about the need to respond to climate, indeed, we should respond. It's also thinking about not just the doing good, giving money, but avoiding the harm, the safeguards. We need to give resources to give meaning and life to safeguards and instruments of engagement like free, prior, and informed consent. Not just a tick the box. Put resources for doing good, put it for avoiding harm. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Stephanie.
We have a great word in Australia, ditto. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It means I agree with everything that's come before and I have nothing more to add. We have 6 weeks till COP. That means there's a lot of work to do together. We're very happy to stand with you to advocate for realistic, appropriate and generous financing. And then we hope you will bring impactful projects to us and hold us accountable for the way we disperse and make sure that they deliver impact.
Thank you. Asil.
I think I already used. No, I agree that it's just a beginning, but it's exciting beginning to hear that more and more happening and for better in multilaterals. And I invite you all to educate us more. And we need to develop also our internal procedures which would meet requirements and needs of Indigenous peoples. And I hope it's just the beginning of our discussion here.
Yes. And we still have Sonia, or is she off? Sonia? Yeah, just last. We're on time. And we are going to listen to the governments who is going to tell us next where we're going with this ambition. Yes, so thank you. Thank you all very much. I would like to acknowledge everyone's presence here is an affirmation of the intention that there is money, again, that we will have to pledge coming COP30, and we'll have to work hard to get that going, and that we need to understand that that is with condition, and that is direct, and that's the ambition. And it's okay to be ambitious, right? So thank you all very much. Yeah. All right, everyone, we